Camera. And we're really here to celebrate a book which has just been released for camera purposes, Lone Star Rising, The Energy Within Me, Choosing Love Over Fear by Kurt B. Johnson, who most people will know because of Shawbuck's. Shawbuck's, a renowned restaurant here in Jamestown, New York, best chicken wings in the world. And but we're going to talk about this unique book and his experience, which is really kind of a 2.5-year experience of your life, and then what you learned from that. But the reason we're here, the three of us, is kind of a delight for me. It's kind of
Me too.
Me too.
Somebody once said deja vu all over again.
It was Yogi Berra,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
there, exactly, exactly. So it was this. As co-founder of the Robert H. Jackson Center, certain individuals at Chautauqua Institution asked me to do programming during the winter. You know, just the kind of, because there's a community there. There is a community of people who are professionals, retirees, but they're very active mentally and they wanted something. So they asked me to do something on Jackson, Nuremberg, and over time it became the Turner Winter Series. And so monthly I would do something at Turner School during the winter, and I would bring in guests and do interviews or something, this monthly event. I remember one time I promoted widely that I was going to bring Anthony Barone. Anthony Barone was a pharmacist, but his niche was old-time radio. You know, Fibber McGee and Molly, he had all of this background, and I thought that would be the best program for our group, says me. And so I promoted it, and the place was packed. This was going to be packed. And so I came there that night. Unfortunately, I was going to pick up Anthony Barone, Dr. Barone, and he got sick. So the place is packed, no way to find anybody. It was just me and this crowd of people. So you may not remember this, Ralph, but on the cuff I said, I don't know half you people. I'm delighted you're here. So I went around and asked everyone, tell me the most, as part of your introduction, first of all, introduce yourself, and tell me the most interesting person you've ever met that's not your spouse or significant other. You know, that's standard stuff. You know, I met my wife, she's so great, you know, all that. I don't want to hear that. Somebody that. So we went around the room and they met presidents, they met everything else, and it came to Dr. Ralph Walton. And he said, well, the most interesting person I've ever met is Mike Wallace. You know, you could just see everybody's head kick back. And I go, Mike Wallace? Yeah, how did that happen? Well, I was featured on 60 Minutes. What? Yeah. And I remember exactly my question was, do you have the tape? Do you have the VHS tape of that event? And you said you did. And I said, enough. Don't say anything more, because now we have the program for our next gathering. It's Dr. Ralph Walton and his appearance on 60 Minutes. And that then was the setup, and then we finished the rest of the day. But now I had a revelation, right, in the audience of a person who attended these Turner events who had been on the 60 Minutes. You got to be kidding me. So in between, I was having lunch with my favorite restaurateur, Kurt Johnson, and just mentioning the fact without having any foreknowledge of anything other than, hey, tonight I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Ralph Walton about this thing called aspartame. I could hardly spell it, let alone pronounce it, and what it all means. But most importantly, he was on 60 Minutes, and I've seen the tape, and I'm going to use it tonight. I'm going to intersperse the tape with the interview. And he said, I'll come, be my guest. So it's open to the public, and he showed up. Kurt shows up and watched it. And during the course of the interview, and I invite anybody to watch it, because I got to tell you, of all the Turner interviews I've ever done, and it's hundreds, it's just blown up. I mean, people watch it. So much so that you've actually gotten reaction from that interview. So maybe as a way to kind of dive into this, Ralph, first of all, talk a little bit about you. You know, give us a little Reader's Digest of kind of where you're from, kind of how the profession you're in, and ultimately how you got to Mike Wallace.
Oh, okay. I'm a general psychiatrist, and I was in academic medicine for most of my career. So I was chairman of a department of psychiatry in a medical school in Ohio. But I never stopped seeing patients. Even when I was a chairman of a large department, I continued to be a practitioner. I felt that a good teacher has to, first of all, be a good physician and a good provider of services. And while taking care of one patient, that patient had grand mal seizures and a real change in her personality. And I had to be a detective and figure out why. And it's a long story, but to cut to the chase, it turned out that I believed that aspartame, the artificial sweetener, was the culprit in her seizure and in her dramatic personality change. And I did some research on that, did a double-blind study, and as a result of that study and some other papers that I wrote, I presented a paper in Washington, an MIT conference actually. So I'd given a number of conferences and lectures about my belief that aspartame was a toxic substance, this artificial sweetener. And since it was widely seen, some folks at 60 Minutes saw that too and called me, and hence the appearance on 60 Minutes.
And from that, though, I mean, you're an outlier at this point. I mean, you're up against Pepsi.
Yes.
I mean,
I've had a struggle, probably a 40-year struggle against the artificial sweetener industry. You know, on the 60 Minutes program, I tried to demonstrate to Mike Wallace that, because he asked me, he said, Dr. Walton, you say that aspartame and other artificial sweeteners are toxic, but there is all this research that demonstrates safety. How do you explain that? And I said, well, you have to look at who funds that research. And I made up a chart showing that 100% of the studies that said that aspartame was safe were funded by the industry. And virtually every study that was independently funded showed one or more problems.
And much of your, as I recall, and correct me, but much of what you've seen, not only with that one individual, but was observational, and you know,
yes,
it was observational.
So-called anecdotal, and anecdotal studies are not respected really in the profession. So I did a double-blind study, and that too demonstrated that there was a significant problem. As a matter of fact, it was so significant that we actually, the Institutional Review Board, put a stop to the study. Every medical school and every academic medical center, when a research project is done, a group called the Institutional Review Board steps in to watch what's happening to make sure that people are not being harmed by the study. And if they feel that patients are being harmed, they'll put a stop to it. And they put a stop to my study because some of the reactions were so severe that they felt this was dangerous. And I believed that the study would not be published because we had a fairly small N, or a fairly small number of subjects, because the IRB stopped it.
Right.
But the statistics were so powerful that even though the N was small, it was still statistically significant, so it was published.
Our interview and the work before and after sort of has continued to have an afterglow.
Yes.
And I know you told me about the interview was seen by somebody in, I think it was France, somebody in Europe, which led to a further follow-up on that, wasn't it?
Well, I've testified before the European Food Safety Authority. Is that what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah.
Yeah, that's not in France. That's in Italy.
Okay.
In Parma, Italy.
Okay.
Yeah. I've never been to France, but
Right.
I went to Parma to testify. Yeah.
And even recently, there's been, because of that interview, I don't want to say because of the interview, but because people now have a recognition of who you are and what you've done.
Yes.
Which makes you unique. I mean, you're kind of this is, when they write your biography, that's going to be one of the principal pieces that,
I doubt whether anybody's going to write my biography.
well, there might be somebody who will help you do an autobiography. But are you able to talk about that now, or is that just a little bit?
Oh, yeah, I can talk about it, I guess. One of the people who saw that interview that you did with me was Kwame Alexander, the author. Mm-hmm. And he visited me last week and said that I was going to be busy this summer. I said to Kwame, busy doing what? He said, you're going to write your memoir. And I told him that I've written scientific papers, but I'm not good at writing that sort of thing. So he volunteered to help.
Wow, that's high cotton.
Yeah.
High cotton. That's terrific. So you attended that particular night at Turner, and it was a revelation probably on many fronts, but one of them was recognition.
Yeah.
You know, of who this guy was, you know?
Right.
What was that? Talk about that.
Well, I remember having lunch with you, and I didn't pick up that you mentioned Dr. Ralph Walton. You mentioned 60 Minutes, and I'm always pitching my Mindful Eatery project at Shaw Books to eventually have food, thought, and environment and consumption. You said, it's got something to do with Mindful Eatery. You should just come up. And I'm like, okay. And I remember the night it was snowy and that, and I went home and I told my wife, and she's like, you're going to go all the way up to Chautauqua in this snowstorm? And I'm like, I got to go. So as you're interviewing Ralph, I remember you asking him questions about his childhood and you know, and getting a feel of who Ralph was in that. And then you asked him about his, you know, becoming a medical doctor, and why would you want to spend the extra time to become a psychiatrist? And like a little kid, he said, curiosity. And that's what brought us all together today, is curiosity. You know, being open and curious. And at that moment, I'm like, well, oh my God, this was in 2015, I think February 2015. But I'm sitting and all of a sudden I have the revelation that, oh my God, I like this guy. You know, I haven't liked this guy for 30 years because of what happened to me in Texas, but I came into Jones Hill. And now curiosity, his story, and now I really like the guy, and now I'm curious about him in your interview.
So that you've segued yourself into the next part of this is your prior life. This is now the book, really the subject matter of the book, Lone Star Rising, which is kind of 1983 through
84 to 86.
Yeah. Time period, which you talk about, which really led to a revelation. And I think it's important to know a little bit of, first of all, about background about you. You're a Jamestown native, and a little maybe about your mom and dad, and just give us a little arc here.
Yeah, so I was raised in a Swedish home, and we went to church every Sunday across the street at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. So the church was part of my upbringing. And I used to dive in high school or elementary school, and then eventually I dove to the high school because they canceled the Wise team. I was into sports, football, and just being a kid, you know. But this thing about the love for diving and the fear of difficult dives played a role in high school, and it seemed to show up many different times in my life. And what inspired me to write this book is my mom dropped off my baby book like in 2012, and she had a smirk on her face, and she said, do you remember one of your first sentences? And I'm like, oh, what do you know? Probably not. And she said, well, open the book. And she opens it up. And as the story goes, it was Maria Walker that you interviewed. She was a prisoner of war during World War II, I think on both sides, the German side and the Russian side. But she was when I was 4 years old, she was my Sunday school teacher. And one day she finds me in the corner crying alligator tears, trying to figure out what's going on. And she finally got me to calm down enough where I could talk, and I just asked her a simple question: who's boss here, pastor or God? And that made it into my baby book. And I don't know if my mom suggested it or not, but she goes, yeah, I thought she said, this might make a good title of a book someday. So in 2012, I'm thinking, oh my God, I got to tell my story. How do I tell this part, that part, and whatnot? So I started writing maybe 10 books at one time, And it was fortunate that I was talking this, I've been doing Mindful Mondays about food, thought, and environment since 2017. And I was talking with Maria Kimberg about possibly teaching a class on it. And she looked through all my writings that I had stapled together, different parts of it, and she pulls out the Texas Experience. She said, here's your first book. This is where your Mindful Mondays were born. This is where you learned everything that you're always talking about. It'll be 100 pages, but who cares? It's still a book. Start here.
So you did start that book, and this is what the end result is. God bless you. Anybody and I know people have asked Ralph, people have asked me, you should write a book, you should write a book. No, I'll talk about me, but I don't want to write about me. That type of thing.
Yeah.
And you've done it. You've done something that most people would not do, and you've done it in a very articulate manner, and there's many people who've read that. But just the storyline itself is one where it's really you being a teenager and doing some stuff kind of sometimes crowd fueled, peer, pressure, a little bit of alcohol, and, a couple of near-death experiences along the way, which ultimately, before you even decided to take your motorcycle to go to Texas.
Yeah.
And
I was always somewhat of a free spirit, and I would, not out of control all the time, but sometimes I was always pushing things to the limits, and I like being curious and not confined,
Well, at one point, a friend of yours, Joe Calla, and you decide that you're going to take it the next step. Actually, motorcycle your way to Texas. And you had to explain that to your parents. I can't imagine that conversation.
No, that was difficult because just a couple years prior to that, I was in a motorcycle accident which involved drinking, and I was going over 100 miles an hour and crashed my bike. It was the night that the Holiday Inn opened in downtown Jamestown. So my sister was wise enough not to tell my parents what was going on, but I spent 8 hours in the ER getting rocks plucked out of me. And by the time I left, I was just bandaged up like a mummy. And I remember being in bed and my parents coming in the room at 9:30 that morning, and they didn't know if they should be angry or grateful that I was alive. And the blood was just gushing through all my gauzes. And my dad was a physical therapist, at WC Hospital. He never wanted me to have a motorcycle because he was always treating the problems with accidents and rashes, brush burns and broken legs. And so here, he was right. I wasn't ready for it. And then I had open wounds for 2 to 3 months after that. I still have all the scars all over my body. I was tarred and feathered in blood. So yeah, that was hard to, tell them that and I traded that motorcycle was a CB750K. I traded that for the 69 Cougar that my best friend Joe Calla's well, let's sell your car and buy another motorcycle. And I just gotten it painted. It was gorgeous. And I'm no, I can't. And then all of a sudden it's okay, maybe. And, if I don't do this, he'll leave without me. And what else am I going to do? I might as well go out and experience the world on a motorcycle, drive around the country, and then spend the rest of my life working.
So I'm visualizing you two guys, kind of that. What was the movie that was so
Easy Rider?
Yeah, Easy
Yeah.
Rider. Thank you, Ralph. Two guys going down there with the kerchiefs coming off, and is that kind of how you were?
Yeah, we were going out on an adventure.
Yeah.
We didn't know where we were going to wind up. We were just, I had the money from selling my car. Joe had some money. It wasn't, we didn't know if we had to camp and live on soup cans or whatever we were going to do. We just wanted to go out and have a adventure.
But you landed in Texas.
Yeah, so the first place we landed was Texas, and we got jobs at a construction site. Name of the contractor, I think, was His Construction. That was the name of the company, and we worked there for a couple weeks, and went and the developer must have had something to do with the development of a brand new condominium complex on Lake Hubbard. And he said, go talk to this lady. She might be able to hook you guys up. And at the time, we were only 18, so I mean, we didn't know you had to have down payments and this, that to rent a condo. And so we went over and talked to this.
Wow, money.
We went over and talked to the woman that was in charge, and she could tell we were in a situation. She goes, well, I'll tell you what, if you pay first month's rent, it'll be cheaper than staying in a hotel tonight. So right on the spot, she gave us keys to the condominium that hadn't been used before, and we moved right in, and she kind of looked out for us in the beginning, and we were able to get settled with that job. And then 2 weeks after that, the construction job had to rework its books, but they wanted to hire us back for more money. He said it'd take a week or two, and I wound up getting a job at Spectrum Auto tinting car windows. Because of my auto mechanics background, I took 2 years of auto mechanics at high school, and I loved cars. So I went that way, and Joey got a job at a fabricating company.
Along the way, while you're going through this job finding and job enhancing process, you're also single. Joe's single.
Yeah.
And you have opportunities, if you will, or exposures, let's say, to alcohol, drugs, and you actually have an experience, which was basically the basis of the title, Lone Star Rising.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a revelation for me. I must tell you, there's much that when I was, I know you, Kurt, but I don't.
Yeah.
I never knew you.
Not in that depth,
that
but
sense.
we've
And
had
I think
lunch.
everybody who's written something in it about the book said the same thing. That you had the guts, the temerity to stick with a storyline that most people would find hard to articulate, and you articulated it well. You want to give a shot at articulating that sort of Texas moments?
So leading up to it, Joe had moved back home, and I had started. What part of the story should I hit you with?
Well, I'm ultimately, you're going to get to a night when you're the Texas Star and
Yeah.
Moonlight and all that, but
So we can go there. So Joey had moved back to Jamestown, and I had moved in with a manager at Spectrum Auto Tent, Galen, and him and I became good friends. And I remember coming home in December for Christmas. I'd been gone for 8 months, and when I got back, Galen started dating the receptionist at Spectrum, and so now I'm kind of the third wheel, a little bit, and I'd been, and everyone was kind of disgruntled about the way the business was going there, and they were paying more attention to the commercial window tinting and not the cars, and so eventually I'll skip over and get to that night because we only have so much time. But anyway, so I would be going up. We had Monopolies, Confettis, and all these different bars. And Tom Bergota that, rode in there, lived there at the time. And Tom was 3 years older than me. I was class 83, he was a class of 80, but we grew up in the same neighborhood. And we got together and went to Confettis and, bar hopped a little bit. But it was all within walking distance. I could go out to these bars by myself, solo, and on the way home I could hit the McDonald's or whatever and go home and never had to drive, so we were in that place. And I was always too shy to talk to women. Now it's different now, but back then being alone there and whatnot, and a lot of times alcohol would assist with my anxiety or, fear of talking to people. And it would make me the life of the party when I was normally the quiet guy in the corner. And I remember, ecstasy was legal back then, and people were doing it. And one time, this girl came up and, said, why don't you dance in this? And I said, I don't know it. I don't like dancing this. And she mentioned that, you should try ecstasy. It's very freeing and you won't need to drink as much and you'll have fun. And so finally I conceded and I did the ecstasy, and what I experienced was like an absence of fear. Like, oh, it was better than alcohol. You had energy, and it was very freeing. So I did that a few times without my roommate or anyone else, and it was fun. And then this was all in a short period, like a month or two time. But at business, things were going really good, and so I was on a little bit of a high, and we all went camping, and then, I had some experiences that were not out of body, but they were, awakenings, and I was constantly contemplating fear and love this whole time, because my mom was trying to shame me to go to church or find a church that, she wanted me grounded, and which I see where she's coming from. But the one night we did it on our campus. We used to have bands. We had an Olympic-sized pool on our complex, and I think there was like 10 pools around the complex. And we did it the one night, but for some reason I had a great time, and we danced. I danced in front of the band and whatnot, and I went 4 or 5 days without sleeping, and I was still contemplating all these things. So I don't know if it was the ecstasy in my system that caused it or what exactly happened. I know now that 4 or 5 days without sleep is going to cause anyone to go a little nutty. But I just remember one night, and I know my roommate was concerned with me, and I was having, what you would call downloads, these spiritual awakening and just feeling and sensing. And one night at the pool, I was contemplating, do I go to church out of fear, or am I going to church out of love? And I had many experiences my whole life between love and fear, and that they creating motion and movement. And I just found a star in the Dallas night sky sitting at the pool. And I said, maybe I'll go into hypnotic meditation, which focusing on a light, which I had learned from diving in high school. One of the college kids came home, and I was struggling going after the difficult dives, even though I could easily perform them. It was just, for some reason, I couldn't do them. Yet I could wreck a motorcycle at over 100 miles an hour and get back on the bike the next day or two after I did it, so I wouldn't be afraid of it. So here I am at the pool and contemplating, about swim team, and not afraid of doing difficult dives, but I love diving. And all of a sudden, I was contemplating what my mom was am I going to church out of love, or would I be going out of church out of fear, And I hypnotic meditation on that star, and all of a sudden, I just saw everything in this pure thing that, there's life is like a battery. There's 2 poles. There's a positive pole, love, and there's a negative pole, fear, and life was like a battery, like the outgoing and return. And then that just awakening just totally, there was like an absence of fear all of a sudden happened. And I went into a higher state of consciousness or coherence, or, what I mean? At the time I didn't have, it was inevitable to try to explain what I had experienced. And so the next day when I'm trying to explain it to my roommate and his girlfriend, and, then I went and saw a psychiatrist and was trying to explain to him, and it was like I had an experience that I was everything all at once, but I just wasn't Jesus or Moses, or what I mean. I felt like I was part of everything, even a chair. It was a strange thing, and to be able to articulate it, there just wasn't words to explain something that was a feeling or an emotion. And so they naturally needed to, I needed help, but unfortunately I didn't get the help I needed.
But you went through like 4, maybe 5 days of sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how it manifested itself to your friends, and of course to you. That's not a good thing.
No.
And there was intervention. They intervened, and they took you to the hospital, as I recall.
Yeah, so what had happened, I went and saw the psychiatrist on a Friday, and he was disgruntled, and I did take, not sure what the medication was he I think it was Thorazine is what he initially prescribed for me on that Friday. And then I didn't sleep again that night after seeing him. So we're sitting around in our condominium, and I was very intuitive. And I just looked and I said, you know what? I think they're coming to get me. And I was in a pair of shorts, no shirt or anything. And next thing I know, I'm getting arrested. Nonviolent, anything, put in handcuffs. And it was crazy. I mean, I still don't understand it. But I needed help, but I don't know if that's the treatment I deserved or needed.
Yeah, you say in your book, in all this sleep deprivation, I must have become more intuitive because I remember jumping out of bed and saying that I was an important prophet. They were coming to take me away. Shortly after, a knock came on the door. 6 policemen were ready to escort me to the hospital for further evaluation. I wasn't even allowed to put on my shirt and shoes. They cuffed my hands behind my back, and off they went. And your next chapter says, from Terrell to hell.
From Terrell to hell.
Terrell.
Yeah. And, yeah, it was, when I first walked in the hospital handcuffed that way, the rows were tight. And I don't know if I put this in the book or not, but I'm being paraded through, and there was probably 12 people on either side, mostly homeless and drug addicts, and this one black woman started bowing down to me, praying that, he's the Savior, he's this. I'm carrying his child, so it was quite a chain of events, because that added to what I was already experiencing. And then once I got upstairs, the nurse was wanting to take my blood, and I was like, that's precious blood, you can't have my blood. And then there was Ron, one of the older guys, Ron, was with us, and he was like, well, he was trying to assist me fill out my forms, because with the sleep deprivation, I couldn't focus enough to fill out forms. I never filled out medical forms anyway, I was only 18. And he's like, well, give him a little blood and start and stop it. And so I was playing around, starting, and I'm pretty sure I was actually doing that. But eventually the nurse, this black woman, was in, and there was glass all around us, and she said, you got to stay away from this woman because of age. You know what I mean? You don't want to get infected. And I was, so I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And then they wanted me to spend the night. And I was like, just one night was their thing. And I was like, I'd rather go home. And Ron convinced me that this is the part of the process. You'll go home tomorrow. Don't worry about it. So they wanted me to sleep in a padded room, which I didn't even know they exist. I thought they were just in movies. And it looked dirty to me. I'm not sure if it was, but I'm like, I wasn't sleeping in there. So eventually I got forced in there, and all of a sudden, where they kept poking in, trying, I got big veins, and back then they would have been easy, but it balled up like this, and I started panicking, thinking that, something was wrong, and I'm pounding on the windows. And so I spent 2 weeks at Parkland Hospital, the same one that JFK went through after the assassination. And it was, I was in with all kinds of people, and it wasn't a bad experience there, but I was taking medications, and the more I took, the more I needed sleep, and then wound up in Terrell, Texas.
And your parents came down.
5 weeks later, I think and I still contemplate that, because I felt abandoned, you know what I mean? And my dad worked and whatnot, and he truly trusted the system. So he figured it was drugs, ecstasy, I'm going to teach him a lesson, was his, you know what I mean? And I mean, if my kids I would, we wouldn't, I don't know. It was hard to contemplate, after. I kind of held a grudge for a while after, but if he didn't come down and escape me, literally, I guess I was committed for 90 days, and there was a counselor that knew that I was going to die had I not gotten out there, And so they had called my parents in for the rescue, and so when I first saw them, they were stunned. I was so medicated, for me to walk just 20 feet took like 5 or 10 minutes. And Yeah, so my mom didn't really even recognize me because I had lost so much weight. And I don't recall ever eating at Terrell, Texas.
You then,
I was 3 weeks there by the time my parents got
Yeah.
there.
and I can see the emotion now.
Yeah, it's hard to.
Why the emotion? Is it because of the parents or because of the experience, or?
It was just, I was sleeping probably 22 out of 24 hours a day. And I can think back of the horror of my mom's face, even when she was taking me back to Jamestown on the plane. She kept looking at me, wondering if it was her son or not.
In your book, you say that you went from 165 down to 111. She said, I looked like a prisoner of war living in a prison camp, which was exactly how I felt. I thought I was a prisoner of some secret war held hostage. I still believe that I may not have made it out of there if it hadn't been for my parents and their efforts to bring me home. And when they did come home, your dad worked at Jamestown General Hospital.
He worked at WCA,
WCA hospital?
but yeah,
You know
but
the
he
hospital
had the
system?
connection to, they wanted me to go to a New York State hospital because I was in a state hospital in Texas, but he coordinated where they would actually allow me to come to Jones Hill, that I would be closer by.
And is that where you connected with the guy to your left?
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't know if you have any recollection of a young
No, he wouldn't.
Kurt?
I actually don't.
Yeah.
And I probably only saw him once or twice, you know what I mean? They come in with a staff of people and they're analyzing and working with, psychotherapists and my original, yeah, you can,
Yeah, the book covers that period of time, and that you'd had so much. My parents first met, and with my doctor, Dr. Walton, he told them I had been simultaneously taking 3 psychiatric drugs, 2 of which were lithium and Thorazine. The doctor commented that my Thorazine close was somewhere around 1,600 milligrams, which was by far the highest he had seen.
yeah.
I assume that's in your medical records. I mean, that's probably.
If we could find them, I don't know if they're available or
Yeah.
not, but it was, and I think it was actually higher than that. I didn't want to use a super high number to make it
Unfortunately,
unrealistic.
that happens quite a bit, that
Yeah.
people with bipolar disorder are often treated with antipsychotics
Yeah.
like Thorazine, and that should not be.
Yeah.
It's,
Ralph isn't part of this, without, obviously, it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
But in one sense, when there's an observation and they put a tag on you, as opposed to the experience aspect of it. So there's kind of 2 ways. Once they put the tag bipolar on you,
bipolar, yeah.
then certain
Certain things happen,
Happen.
and yeah, as I said, one of the things that can happen and shouldn't is that people with bipolar disorder are often put on antipsychotics, and if Kurt was on 1,600 milligrams of Thorazine a day, that is indeed a huge dosage. I mean, bipolar patients shouldn't be put on Thorazine at all, but if they are, certainly not at 1,600 milligrams a day.
Yeah. And once they have that level, you can't just go cold turkey. I mean, I suspect, it just can't.
Well, you can know. There isn't a dangerous withdrawal. If you take Valium, for example,
Yep.
yes, that has to be tapered very gradually or you can have a grand mal seizure.
Right.
That's not true with a drug like Thorazine.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it often is tapered just to make sure that somebody doesn't become flagrantly psychotic again. But it's not going to have the same withdrawal problems as, say, Valium or Librium or Ativan, that sort of, the so-called benzodiazepines. There you have to taper. With drugs like Thorazine, you don't really have to taper. You can just stop it. But generally, as general practice, patients usually are tapered. But you're not going to seize if it's suddenly stopped.
So,
Go ahead, jump in.
so after your interview in 2015, and I'm like, oh my God, I got to talk to this guy. I went up to Ralph and I introduced myself, said I owned Shawbucks, and Ralph was like, well, our bowling team eats at Shawbucks all the time. So we quickly rekindled and became friends, and he and I had lunch a number of times and kept in touch, and you actually had lunch with us on some other work you know, at Shawbucks. And so we had the friendship, and then COVID and things split, and then I got back to writing my book. And once I completed my book, I'd gotten a few new phones since then, so I didn't have his cell number, email, somehow it got lost. And I reached out to you because I wanted to be authentic and honest. I didn't want to say anything out of bounds of anything. So, you know, Ralph kindly read the digital copy of my book and had a reservation the next day of Valentine's Day. And he read it just all within 24 hours, and all he responded was, "Beautiful little book, exclamation point, don't change a thing." So then I'm thinking, you know, I truly have to follow up, you know, and so we went, and he invited me up to his house, and we went in his study, and we talked for like 3 hours, and it was one of those high energy, intense, and we're, you know, both, when we were done, I was like staggering just, you know, from the intensity. But what was extremely profound was, I thought for all these years that the Thorazine was treating a bipolar or manic depression condition. When I got back to Jamestown, they got me off the lithium right away, so I thought lithium was the devil, and you know that I got to stay away from that. And I'm on these high doses of Thorazine, and they would take me off maybe 50, 100 milligrams every month. So at the end of our conversation, Ralph goes, well, Thorazine's for treating schizophrenia mostly, I think.
Yes.
And so here I've gone 40 years, and we had previous conversations, but we never got in the depth that we did that day, you know. And then by the end of our conversation, I was like, "Ralph, do you think you could write a foreword?" You know, he goes, "I think so, I'll try." But truly, there's so much more to the story, and not knowing, you know, for sure what happened in Texas. I'm still not 100% clear, you know what I mean, that it was you know, if you have a manic episode, you might not sleep, but if you're in a mania, normally you wouldn't remember all the details of the events. And so it's still not 100% with me, but I still want to explore. And I love the curiosity of Ralph, being that he's still curious, you know, and can listen to a story and engage without an ego saying this is right or wrong, and just truly observing the situations in somewhat of a non-judgmental way, because it's these type of topics that really there's not truly a language for it, or I'm trying to develop a language that could hold conversation. And so yeah, and I mean, and so I was always under the impression, because my dad said, if you get off your meds, you know, I'll drop you off at Warren State Hospital and I won't turn back. You know, he was embarrassed. My dad was a macho man and weightlifter, and you know, and I love the guy. I'm not saying anything against him, but
Your dad, though, should realize that some of the greatest geniuses in history have been bipolar, you know.
Yeah.
Isaac Newton, Virginia Woolf, Winston Churchill. I mean, the list is extensive, and it's really important that psychiatrists not get in the way. And certainly putting you on Thorazine is very much getting in the way.
Yeah, but I understand you know, when you get back here, and then I only saw Dr. Walton while I was at Jones Hill 2 East, and then I went and saw Dr. Gorman from Buffalo, but he was worried about what he was dealing with because he never saw what the conditions, and then they never gave us my medical records, and Mike Connard, my psychotherapist that you worked with a lot, tried over the course of a year or more to get medical records, and they wouldn't release them. And I think in those records, I was on more than 3 medications. I was on like 6 different drugs in my system, and there's no way I could have got something other than what they were claiming. Mm-hmm. But we never were able to retrieve those records to really know what happened. And Dr. Gorman didn't know what he was dealing with either, you know. So if you take them off too quick or something, I could have another episode. I could be, and it's fear. You know, they're afraid I might hurt myself, or they're afraid I might hurt someone else. So you're back into the loop, you know, of choosing fear over love, but you still have to have caution.
Choice. You know, you write in your book that after a few weeks of becoming reacquainted with living at home, I started going out drinking with my friends again, obviously ill-advised. as my doctor said drinking might adversely impact my medications. He also informed me that were I to stop my meds cold turkey, my heart could give out and I could experience a seizure or a stroke. And in fact, you have, in your
That
book...
would have been more with the lithium, I think, than
No,
the Thorazine or...
Again, you can
not.
just suddenly stop lithium. You're not going to have a withdrawal
Okay.
seizure. Okay, it's a mineral, but it's got to be very carefully titrated. If you get too much, you're going to have kidney damage. You can damage your thyroid. So it's got to be monitored very, very carefully. Lithium is still the gold standard for bipolar disorder, but younger psychiatrists are fearful of using it because it can also damage people. So.
But you chose to go out drinking, despite all of this great...
I was missing all the fun out there, and I was
I mean, you were out there, I mean, you tell
I
the
wanted
story
to see all
about
my friends, you know.
and out in the Rusty Nail and how you were directing traffic.
Yeah.
Kind of an interesting...
No, I had
It's
one
a
too
good
many
visual.
drinks, but I was still like, I think the aftershocks of when you go through a spiritual awakening, I think they can last, 2, 3, 4 weeks after, and you're not fully in control, and it does become a disorder and a dysfunction. And yeah. And so I wound up back in 2 East after that, and then, that's when my dad said, if you get off these meds again, I'm taking you. I had the choice of go on to New York or Warren State Hospital. He said, I'll drop you off there, and that's it. I'm not putting up with this.
Fast forward to all of a sudden you have a 3-hour session with a former patient who had written a draft of a book. What did you think when he sort of sent that to you? You reacquainted, and though you probably, again, one of many, many patients you have no reason to, frankly, remember much about, if anything
I
occurred.
have some vague recollection, but I can't recall.
Yeah,
the
but
specifics.
still,
Yeah.
he's sitting down there in front of you.
Yeah.
And you're retired, you're up at Chautauqua, and
Yeah.
Kurt shows up, and did he bring chicken wings? I just want to know.
No, he didn't.
So, but, you had this conversation without belying confidences. What was it like?
Oh, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful. As I said, some of the greatest geniuses, most creative people in history have had bipolar disorder. And I think it's important to treat the full-blown manic episodes, or certainly the depressive episodes if people have suicidal thoughts, that has to be treated.
Right.
But otherwise, psychiatrists should get out of the way and let them be creative. And I taught my medical students and residents, if they used lithium, to keep it at the very, very bottom of the therapeutic range, and in that way allow that creativity, that energy, that joy of living to be there. If you over-medicate, you're going to rob them of that creativity. So for psychiatrists, it's important, get out of the way.
So what did you see? What have you seen in him? I mean, all of a sudden, Kurt Johnson, here he is today, live. He's Shawbucks. He's got Mindful
Mondays.
and other projects. I think you're expanding Shawbucks. You got the tremendous program going on here. Do you get a sense of this? Is that the genius part of
Yeah,
this?
sure, the creativity, yes, he has that joy, that wonderful creativity that you see so often in people like Winston Churchill or Robin Williams. Yeah, Kurt has that.
I got to ask the question. You were kind enough to send a whole script, none of which we went through. I just want you to
No,
know
that's fine.
We
I
really
just-
blown through the script.
Yeah.
Yeah, and which we kind of.
No, that wasn't. We wanted it to be a free-flowing conversation.
Kind of when you go through this,
wherever it goes,
you'll see we sort of covered most of it. But you use a term which I honestly still don't understand. You talk about the experiential philosophy, the energy within me, and analog binary language of hermetics. Hermetics. Explain that.
So experiential philosophy is basically observing your own lived experience, and as the observer, but also the experiencer, so that when you notice these reoccurring patterns and whatnot, that it's whether it's emotions and whatnot, it's looking at emotions as data, not disorder. And that when you're experiencing life, you seem to complain about what you don't want, and that becomes a recursive loop, and when you're focused on what you don't want, you get more of the same experiences. So the more you complain, the more you get the same. And it just seemed to be a pattern that I could look back on all my life as a emotional awareness and emotional intelligence, which is actually like an authentic intelligence that is just trying to return you back to love. So fear doesn't become a disorder, it becomes more of a discoherence in your field, so to speak. And love is the ultimate, not emotional love, like this is a love above love that I experienced in Texas, where you'd have the two poles of an emotional fear and emotional love, and the only thing that separates you from love is fear, yet the only thing that returns you to love is that discomfort, and then that discomfort becomes a disorder, and then that disorder becomes a disease, and then the fourth D would be death. So that's what experiential philosophy is, not judging how you feel bad or good, but being curious and wondering, why do I feel this way? Why am I anxious? Why am I depressed? And not focus on not wanting to be it, allowing the fear, the emotion, or whatever it is to tell its story, and then pay attention to where you feel it in the body. It's crying out, it wants to be heard. And then, so that's where I first began the experiential philosophy. The energy within me evolved by just paying attention to energy. By definition, energy is the ability to create motion or movement. And I believe there are two invisible forces that create movement within ourselves and those around us. And those energies are love and fear. So that's energy. And then within me, started out with the Mindful Eatery, meaning Mindful Eatery, and that's you're either gaining or leaking your energy, in the areas of your food, thought, and environment. You consume food, you consume your thoughts, you consume your environment. So that's where the Mindful Eatery project was born, that I started trying to, work with in 2012, because I knew the importance of the three pillars of the Mindful Eatery. And then the more trying to develop a language that I could really look at love and fear as more of a binary language, when I started learning about digital communication, ones and zeros, and trying to use programs and realizing that's a language, words are a language, numbers are a language. Well, that's the missing language, analog binary hermetics. So analog is a eternal frequency, eternal wave, and digital frequencies are kind of a compact, more non-analog communication, but it gives information. And if you look at your experiences and your experiential philosophy of your life, you can see these recursive loops of these patterns repeating themselves. And generally, most of the time, you're choosing fear over love, and you get in these negative patterns that show up. And I think it's the invisible world becoming manifested in the material world.
And you mentioned here, and there's a note, a key idea. Instead of suppressing fear, analog binary hermetics encourages recognizing it as data, a signal that sometimes is out of alignment, and using its discomfort to guide us back towards love. The central lens through which to discuss mental, emotional, and spiritual dynamics. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of an accurate description?
Yeah, that is very good. And
back to the eating being part of that. In my time period, you're much younger than me, but there was the reference: you are what you eat.
Yeah.
And knowing what you're espousing is that the next generation? Is that the next iteration of that concept?
Yeah, and when you look at, Ralph's work, truly, I began to realize that certain foods would give me comfort, certain foods would give me anxiety, and the more I looked into this, and what drove the like driving a nail home with a sledgehammer, like a finished nail with a sledgehammer. After your interview about aspartame, I just started looking at all the processed food in that, And I had the revelation before this interview, but this was like, you're right, this is so true. And I look at processed food as pharmaceutical food, in my opinion, because all the colors, the dyes, the aspartame is in those foods, creating all these chronic illnesses, and they're creating mental disorders, and so it seems like they're getting you sick with the food, and they're selling you the solution with a pill that you got to take once or twice a day for the rest of your life. And I think going back to more organic, plant-based food that doesn't have the glyphosate and regenerative farming, where you're allowing things to grow naturally without the interference of man's choosing profit over people on the planet, and start choosing the people on the planet over profits, is the way forward.
Is your goal, as far as just practically, you're working Shawbucks, you got restaurant on the first floor, you got the second floor, you're working out, is that going to be kind of an eatery, an education, a laboratory?
Yeah.
What's the ultimate goal there?
I really love the idea of experiential learning, and I don't enjoy cooking, I don't enjoy farming and all this, and I'd love to bring the experts in to a building that you could have experiential learning and experience how you feel when you're on a clean diet, like a Vital Mind Reset diet with Kelly Brogan. It's not just you're going to lose weight and have all these positive side effects from, eating a cleaner diet, but you feel safe within your body, and just that alone, without all those added, pharmaceutical ingredients into your food, you feel safe, you experience a higher and more aligned life. And I mean, just truly, if you meet the basic needs of the people on the planet, and you've got food to eat, you got shelter, your basic needs are going to met, you take the fear out of the equation, people are going to behave a lot better. And if you could move away from punishment more into coherence and understand the balance between fear and love. Hermetics came from Hermetics, the 7 principles, in the Kabbalion, but also the Hermetic Ka. And it's, the polarization is simply, there's no spot between the poles where hot and cold exist. And if you look at the poles of fear and love the same way, it's a harmony, it's a coherence. So our next level of consciousness is going to be through coherence. And that way you can observe with more of a non-judgmental manner.
So tell me, if I become your disciple,
I don't want that.
You told us you were a prophet at one point.
Yeah, but that was 40 years ago.
Well, I have to give up chicken.
No, I know.
I have to give chicken.
The work is within you. It's not within me. My work's within me, your work's within you.
I just want to know, hopefully, if I can still go down to the first floor and have a chicken wing once in a while.
Yeah, no, it's totally, you get the experience you choose, you know what I mean? But you got to be tough if you're going to be stupid, because you know the results, or you make better choices.
Okay.
Like going out in front of Rusty Nail and directing traffic, you got to pay the...
That's official.
Yeah.
So you're listening to this, Ralph, and he's really disclosed a lot here. I mean, this is bravery at its finest.
Yes, it is.
To do what you've done, I mean, and to expose yourself. You've become...
I've been exposed.
Yeah, no question. You made yourself very vulnerable by writing this book talking about my 2-year adventure and how I'm here today to talk about it, but I did, and now I've talked about it. Not many people would be brave enough to do that. I mean, we press that, and it's better left unsaid. As you as a psychiatrist, what did it take, Kurt, to kind of do this? I mean, what?
Yeah, it took bravery, it took creativity, it took the genius that so many people with bipolar disorder have.
So, in your reaction, now this is out, and there's some people have read this.
Right.
What do you get a sense have you heard from people?
They did find it, courageous to go out and tell this story. And I had seen psychiatrists, a lot of them appreciated my business, the restaurant, I'm not talking about Ralph, and, you know, their suggestion was, you know, you have to hide this in the closet. Don't talk about it. You'll lose your business career. And I just felt different, you know. And I still don't know I don't think there's any emotion that's a disorder. It's information, it's data. I don't identify as bipolar, and I've had experiences, but I don't think anything in life is a permanent condition. I believe, you know, all is mind, the universe is mental, you know, and I think quantum physics and all these things are going back to that truth that, in my words, what you think about, you bring about, you know. Think happy thoughts for health, anxious thoughts for illness. It's easier said than done, but your thoughts are powerful. They're invisible, they're energy, they're frequencies. They can measure them outside your body as much as they can, you know. And the interesting thing is, you know, you talk about the gold standard of the triple blind, you know, you can do that and everyone's not supposed to know what's going on. It's an eternal double blind study, but when you get into psychiatry and human behavior, there's not always that double blind to work from. And maybe this is for another conversation someday, but I've shared, you know, what if we could do an internal double blind, you know, if that was a possibility. But you know, there's a big difference between a double-blind gold standard and, you know, originally it was a chemical imbalance, you know, and that I was taking these chemicals to balance my chemical imbalance. And now that's not true, and that was something more 40 years ago. And I think even 20 years ago, you know, I was told I had a chemical imbalance when I went 4 nights without sleeping, without drugs or anything. But it was more of a spiritual awakening again. But you just have to, you know, I'm not medicated now, and if someone's on meds, I'm not a doctor, I'm just an experiencer. I'm talking from inside my experience, and actually I'm observing my own experiences to understand why I do what I do and other people do what they do. And there is just 2 fundamental forces that create movement. You know, embarrassment is a fear of what other people think, and that creates behavior. And justice through punishment is another control by fear. And we're controlled by fear everywhere we go and everywhere and everything we do. It's hard to choose love over fear. You know, our healthcare system, in my opinion, and my experience, and I'm a cancer survivor as well, and I wouldn't be here without chemotherapy, which I almost didn't take because of Jimmy Ross. You know, I watched him go through all the chemotherapy and radiation. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'll be with Jimmy, you know. But when you look at anything, it's all fear-based. This could happen, that could happen, and your body's chemistry aligns with that. And the more you think about being afraid, the more that reality brings forth. And it's a challenge to have an honest and authentic look at, are you reacting? Are you responding? Are you, you know, creating movement within your children of punishment and taking their phone away, or, you know, spanking? Is that creating behavior, or are you creating behavior through authenticity, honesty, compassion, kindness, love? And that allows them to understand the difference between choosing love or fear in any move you make. I mean, life is choice because it's always changing. We're gifted with many choices all the time because life is always changing.
One of the things that, in preparation for this, Ralph, you actually written a book. You're an author of the seminal book, Double Blind.
Double blind.
And at least it says here, I must confess I haven't not read it, but Dr. Walton's research has been instrumental in exposing the limitations of conventional diagnostic models and the critical importance of unbiased inquiry. Is that accurate?
Where's that from?
I don't know. It's right here. I'm reading it.
Yeah, but is that from? Is that on the internet or something?
Yeah, it must have been. Yeah, yeah. Is that true or
I hope so.
Yeah. But that's I didn't make that up. And is there something to, you know, where Kurt was actually kind of diagnosed at some point
Yeah.
Texas.
And I didn't really come back with a
Bipolar,
diagnosis.
and as a result, once somebody had objectively, or subjectively rather, put a tag on it.
Yeah.
They gave me a diagnosis of, my diagnosis was brain damage.
Oh, was that right?
It wasn't a,
Wasn't bipolar?
no, it was brain damage from ecstasy.
Ah.
That's what I lived with for 20 years.
And so,
You don't have any brain damage.
I
or-
know, but that's what, when I
Yeah.
came
but
back,
that
that's
then
what my
starts a
parents.
path. Once somebody puts that tag,
Tag on, yeah.
then the tag, then now you've got the research over time that says, once you have that, then you gotta do this, rather than the critical importance of unbiased inquiry. You know, about, let's
Yeah.
figure out a little bit more behind that. Now, I'm gonna be a little bit off subject here, Ralph, but I think it's important about
Yeah.
you, the person. Because there is in your background the fact of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that, again, how that may have influenced not only how you think, but also the profession you got into?
Wow.
That's a
a
good
difficult
question.
question to answer, Greg. Yeah, my parents were Holocaust survivors. And that probably contributed to my questioning authority, governments, the prevailing wisdom, perhaps. You know, I mean, the prevailing wisdom in Nazi Germany was that Jews were worse than dogs and needed to be wiped out.
Your parents were German Jews?
My parents were German Jews,
Okay.
yes. My father was charged with sabotage against the German government, so he was a wanted man. They had to literally go on the run. And they had to go from country to country, and since he was wanted, they couldn't show their papers, so they survived by their wits and bravery, really. My father tried to convince the rest of my mother's family that they had to run, that they were going to be wiped out. He'd read Mein Kampf, he knew what Hitler's goal was, and he tried to convince the rest of the family that they had to go on the run with him. And my mother's parents and grandparents didn't believe that my dad was right, so they remained, and most of the family was wiped out in Auschwitz. I still have my maternal grandmother's beautiful letters. She was very literate and a very intelligent woman, and she knew towards the end what was going to happen to her. I have those letters still. She went into the ovens of Auschwitz.
How's that impacted? You just talked a little bit about your feelings about government and just, would that be you see a natural
I never thought about it before, but I think there is a linkage
here?
between my
I can't-
heritage and my challenges of the prevailing wisdom.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I've challenged the FDA's conclusion that artificial sweeteners are safe. No, they're not. And I've tried to prove that. As I said, for the last 40 years, I went to England to testify before Parliament, and.
It kind of kept you curious and questioning and curious.
You know, we didn't
that's
win.
Where that probably came from.
But in the book, Double Blind, I actually name the 40 members of the House of Commons who voted for the legislation. I worked with Roger Williams, a member of Parliament from Wales, he has a PhD in physiology, a very bright man. And we together worked for a week composing legislation, which he then submitted to Parliament. I knew it was going to be voted down because I saw all of the lobbyists that I had seen in Parma, in Italy, and that I first saw at the MIT. I spoke at an MIT conference way back in the 80s. And lobbyists from the artificial sweetener industry wanted to take Mary, my wife, and me out to dinner at that conference. I refused, but I saw, the day that I arrived there in Washington for the MIT conference, dietary phenylalanine brain function it was called, I saw those lobbyists meeting with Temple University people, and I'd spoken with those researchers from Temple, and they were going to deliver a paper at that conference on their belief or the hypothesis that artificial sweeteners made control of diabetes more problematic, and they had evidence to that effect. I saw them that night when my wife and I went to the hotel restaurant. We were not there as guests of the lobbyists. I refused their invitation to dinner. But I saw those lobbyists with the Temple University researchers, and the next day their paper was pulled, wasn't presented. So I know the power of lobbyists, the power of the artificial sweetener industry. And I've encountered that for the last 40 years.
Yeah.
You know, they're saying that basically that I'm an idiot.
That's a problem.
But nevertheless, I just want to conclude that, but nevertheless, didn't Pepsi pull aspartame?
Yes.
I mean,
So we've had a
That's
little
an
impact.
accomplishment.
We've had a little impact.
I mean, you got to sit there and say, all right, I ruffled the waters. I've been out there and I've done what I needed to do. You were in.
But it's still in 6,000 products.
Yeah.
But you know what the problem is that, you know, America's a great country, but unfortunately, it's the greatest country money can buy through lobbyists.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you don't get an authentic opinion when you're being lobbied. You don't get an authentic government when they're choosing money and profits over people on the planet. That's our biggest problem. Now, you saw it firsthand. We see it all the time. It's constantly.
But you know, you got this huge inquiring mind, and I'm glad we have talked about the potential connection to life's experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I never thought about it before, but yes, my background probably does have something to do with it.
yeah, and so that has in turn found form in your practice, and one of the people who lived it and felt it was Kurt, and you actually read his book and reacted to it. So I mean,
No, and it's funny how, like with my story,
I'm not sure the term for all of that, but it's serendipity.
with my story, you know, going through the Texas experience, I mean, not that I'm a rebel or anything, totally. I mean, I am in my own way, but I never really trusted the medical system after that fully. But had I not, when I had testicular cancer 2 weeks after I signed my lease to build Shawbucks, and I didn't follow through with the chemotherapy, I wouldn't be here today. So it's like a double-edged sword for me, you know, and I do think there's, you know, I'm not speaking out against it, but I'm always curious if there's more to the story. And, you know, and I don't know a lot about the triple blind studies, but is it true that, you know, if you have 100 failures in a triple blind to have a drug put on the market, is it true that you only need one correct study to show that it worked once over the 100 times it failed, or is that not true?
No.
I mean, I'm just curious, you know what I mean? Because I don't know how it actually works, you know what I mean? The people that are putting a drug on the market are paying for the study.
Yeah, the FDA
and it
looks
just
at the
doesn't seem
preponderance
right.
of the evidence. But so many studies are clearly fraudulent. I tried to show that in my book, that the numbers often are clearly faked. It's very, very easy to spot the fraud in many of these medical studies that are funded by the industry. Mm-hmm. And they also see, as I said, the FDA looks at the number of studies that show that something is safe. And I also try to demonstrate in the book that often one single study is actually published in multiple medical journals, making it look as though there are 6 or 7 publications when in fact there was one study. It's actually fraudulent to do that. And when you submit a paper to a medical journal, you have to sign a statement that, you know, it's not been submitted elsewhere, etc. But often they'll change one word in the title of the study, or change the order of the sequence of the authors, and then submit it multiple times. And I've documented how the same paper appears in lots of different journals.
Wow.
So it looks as though there's an overwhelming number of studies, when in fact there might be a couple.
Wow.
And it's all for profit.
Yeah.
So, this is what AI said, AI.
Oh,
Okay, artificial intelligence, it says, who was put in the idea of this gathering today of Dr. Ralph Walton, Kurt Johnson. This is what we were supposed to accomplish. Together, Kurt and Dr. Walton will guide us through a dialogue that explores the profound difference between the double-blind study, the gold standard of objective observation, and the lived experiences of the individual, Kurt, especially in the realm of mental health and consciousness. We'll delve, this is what we're supposed to be doing, we'll delve into how Kurt's experiential philosophy and analog binary harmetics offer a new lens for understanding the unseen thoughts and emotions of the mind, and how this perspective can reshape our approach to healing, justice, and the very nature of truth itself. This is what AI told me we should do today. So, did we do it?
I think, and there's one thing question I have is you have the gold standard, with a double blind, and now if you're reading mental health, I don't know if you could apply those same things to someone's internal workings. Is there some way? There seems like a big difference between a double blind where someone's getting the placebo effect and whatnot. But I mean, is there a way that that you could authentically do like an internal double blind study with someone, and and how would you conduct that? If someone's got a label now and they start believing that could be the nocebo effect. There's just so many ways to look at something where everything's suggested, it's observed, it's fitting patterns, but you can't do a chemical test to see if someone's got bipolar or schizophrenia. It's more done on observation of someone else, and it doesn't always include the experiencer. So I don't know what.
Yeah, we don't always listen. We don't listen well enough to our patients. Yeah.
And I mean, it's they're like two different studies on behavior and health. They're opposites in a way. A double blind and a psychiatric evaluation, they don't have, what's the difference of them, of how it could get, and it's a language that I don't know if it exists yet, I don't know.
So here we are, we're, because of Lone Star Rising, Kurt Johnson, and here we are today, the three of us. This is unusual for me to do this type of triumvirate gathering. And you agreed to come because we're here because the book is the genesis. But is there a question, Kurt, that you expect that I would ask of you that we haven't asked?
No, I appreciate you guys doing this and assisting me in promoting my book and telling the story and how we all got together. No, I don't think there's anything at the moment. I just kind of wanted to let it flow and be in the moment and keep the conversation going, not by me directing it or not, But I do see, the role of fear and love. It's in every decision we make, and I was hoping to get the point across that that fear's a language that we don't pay attention to, and we try to avoid it. And fear makes us dumb. Like, people will, and myself included, when you're in the state of fear, you'll grab for a falsehood even if it gives you a temporary stability. And I think that's where you get into the troubles globally, personally, and everywhere, is you're choosing fear over love just to find a false sense of security, and it's not always true. And if you actually listen to your body, the feelings and the way you feel, it's data, and it'll assist you in returning to this wholeness in the state of mind, body, spirit. I think spirit needs to be brought into the equation, and spirit is basically just authentic intelligence.
So Ralph, likewise, you agreed to come down and to join this
I was looking forward
unholy
to it.
trio. Is there questions you thought that may be coming your way that we haven't really asked?
I was wondering if Kurt had read a book entitled Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, because your book reminds me of that very much.
No, I haven't, but I think someone...
Yeah, and that was a bestseller, you know, for many, many years. I hope your book sells well too. It deserves
Just
to.
in case you want to see a motorcycle. And,
That
not
won't
if
be
there's
bought
a
on
segue,
Amazon.
but there we go, folks. There you go. Can you see that, Ed?
That's only in the local printed version. Amazon, I
Well,
wasn't
now
able to print.
we have an exclusive. There we go.
You can buy it at Everyday's too now.
And interestingly, in that book, the author talks about experiences, and it becomes very philosophical. And those philosophical reveries are referred to as chautauquas.
Ah,
Really?
Yeah,
no kidding.
yep.
Maybe that's why I live here.
There you go. There it pulled together.
But if you look at all the stories, you know what I mean, and in the hero's journey or any of those in the prodigal child, you have life is like a battery. You have the outgoing and the return, and curiosity brings you away. And at some point, the discomfort in that, it's time to go home, and it's time to come home to wholeness. And I think lived experiences, everyone is the creator of their own experience, whether they realize it or not. You know, no, and I think one thing I would like to bring into this conversation, and it comes from Eleanor Roosevelt's quote that no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. But you could expand on that to no one can make you really feel anything without your consent. If you're seeking yourself outside yourself for the validation of feeling worthy or anything, no one is going to allow you to feel worthy without your consent. Like you're the one, if someone triggers you and you get angry or you hate someone because they made you feel a certain way, that's data to wake you up. You know, it's a reflection of something within you that you don't like, and it becomes a recursive analog binary loop. That's what an analog binary loop is that someone triggers you, you get offended, and now you hate the person, where actually it's an opportunity to grow and return. So no one's going to make you happy without your consent. If you're expecting your wife, your business, your new car to make you happy, it's a fleeting happiness. It's not a true happiness unless you can accept it within yourself. So I think a lot of the problems going on right now is people are seeking themselves outside themselves, not realizing that your felt state is up to you. Life is choice because it's always changing, but your inner way you feel is up to you. It's not up to someone outside you. I guess that would be the one thing that I wanted to say that just popped out.
Delighted you said it. I'm delighted we said it.
It's all about asking questions. Like you questioned this and that.
I've
and
never
I started,
even had the thought, but you know, you made a connection for me, Greg.
Yeah, well, no charge. Maybe a chicken wing. Huh?
Yeah, no, well, anytime.
And it's been delight. I've really enjoyed this.
So have I.
This
Yeah,
is kind
thank you.
Neat.
Well, thank you so much. I
Yeah,
really
thank
appreciate it.
you.
Yes.
Thanks, Ed.